Hello, everyone. Our webinars will be starting in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, be sure to download the project files that go along with today's session and jot down these links so that you can always revisit the other webinars for this series. So thanks. We'll be going in about, like I said, 10 minutes. Hello, everyone. Our webinar will be starting in just a few minutes. Due to the fact that some of the sections are quieted for dramatic effect, we're recommending that you may put on some headphones in order to hear all the parts of today's webinar. If not, be in a place where you could turn up the volume up and down. Either way, we'll be starting in just 2 or 3 minutes, so please stand by. Hello, and thank you for joining us for what is the fifth and final installment in the Unreal Engine for Architectural Design and Visualization webinar series. Fear not, we have more webinar series scheduled for the upcoming new year so we can continue to serve up all the great info you're so hungry for. If you haven't guessed, I am not Chris Murray. Chris was unable to join us today due to a scheduling conflict, but will return for future webinars. I'm Eddie Perlberg, and some of you may know me from my numerous talks and webinars from places like Autodesk University or SIGGRAPH, maybe the National Association of Broadcasters or NAB conferences, or a whole lot more. I've been an advocate and evangelist for design visualization and 3ds Max for many, many years. It is my honor and privilege to be joined today by Fabrice Borelli. So he'll be taking us through and introducing us to the VR workflow in Unreal. For those of you who are new to the webinar series, you might be asking yourself, well, why Unreal? Well, it may be because of our legacy. With 18 years as a premium award-winning real-time engine, we are the industry standard for which many are compared when it comes to quality and realism. We have an enterprise team worldwide working on exactly your issues and focusing on solving the types of things that you'll encounter in your work with design visualization and design. We're everywhere with over 3 million users worldwide, and best of all, we're free. So free versions include the full tool set. Everything you see in today's webinar will be presented in that free tool, so you can download and start creating and presenting to your heart's content. So like I said, this is number 5 in a 5 webinar series, obviously 1 through 4 before that, including the introduction to Datasmith, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, it's important to understand that you do not need to have seen those in order to enjoy today's webinar, but I certainly do encourage you to go back if you haven't seen them and or revisit them, as they are a gold mine of great information. Today's webinar is on VR production, and coming soon, we will have more in the Unreal webinar series for product design and manufacturing. And while this may not be your area of focus, again, a lot of great information is presented in this webinar series as well. And like I said, coming up, new series in the architectural and design visualization webinars. So stay tuned for those. So we talked about Datasmith. What is Datasmith? For those of you who aren't familiar, it is a plugin for the Unreal Engine that allows you to bring in design visualization and CAD data directly into the engine without fidelity loss or additional complexity. Now, this is an open beta, and you can sign up for it now by visiting us at unrealengine.com/beta. The response has been overwhelming, so please be patient as we fulfill all of the beta requests that we have gotten in. Here's a quick example of how the Datasmith plugin actually works. This time using 3ds Max for the example. You can see that texture maps, material shaders, geometry, lighting, and cameras all going through the Datasmith plugin come directly into the Unreal Engine with little or no manipulation or loss. So the fidelity is maintained, and this continues for many, many design applications, and the list of those applications continues to grow. So as we continue to develop the Datasmith plugin, so will its ability and the number of applications that it supports also grow. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. So like I said, during the course of the presentation, we'll share the links to those other installments in the series. So don't be distracted by trying to Google them now or trying to find them. We'll post those as a sticky note in the web chat. Portions of today's presentation have been pre-recorded, so I can assure you Fabrice and I are here to answer your questions and to make sure everything runs smoothly. Now, speaking of questions in the chat rooms and polls, please be respectful. We are all artists and professionals here, and we want to make sure that we continue to present these in the professional manner that we've grown accustomed. So we rely on you to also maintain that level of respect. When submitting a question, please use the question button, and you access that with the chat pull down. Now, there's a flurry of activity already in the chat room, so you can imagine that questions might fly by without our even seeing them. So by using the QA button, when you submit your question, that will bring it up into a special area of our interface so that we'll make sure that we can see them. Now, like I said, we're going to be answering questions during the presentation, but some might require extended explanation or may just be great for group discussion. So we'll save those to the Q&A section at the end. Others may require additional information or resources, so we'll capture your email address and make sure we get to you after the webinar. Now, speaking of after the webinar, you'll receive an email with links to the replay. So be sure to sit back, enjoy today's webinar as we present it, and then go back at any time and watch it again and pick up on the subtle details of some of the things that Fabrice is going to be showing. And more importantly, be sure to fill out the survey. We want to make sure that we're hitting all the right notes for you as we continue on with these webinar series. So be sure to fill that out, and I thank you in advance for doing that. But now on to the show. So let me introduce to you Fabrice Borelli, a well-known architect and visualization artist. His clients include Thomas Heatherwick, including Google, Nike, Bentley, the International Olympic Committee, and a whole lot more. You can visit him at fabriceborelli.com, where he has a number of great resources for you, including links to some of his e-courses just released, lighting in the Unreal Engine. So you can imagine when you see Fabrice's work today, this is a resource that you're definitely going to want to tap into. So without further ado, please let me introduce to you Fabrice Borelli. Fabrice, take it away.
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you, Eddie. Welcome to this architectural visualization webinar number 5 about virtual reality. We are going to talk about a lot of things today, so make yourselves comfortable and let's see what we are going to talk about. To start with, we're going to have a quick overview of the hardware, what's needed, the head-mounted displays themselves, the goggles. Then we're going to look at the interface in Unreal Engine and see what is made already available to us in terms of VR template, and the VR scene, and just explore a little bit what we've got to work with here. Then we are going to have a look at this Blade Runner scene, the little story behind, and then we'll set up the VR that we've seen before in this scene, and finally we'll have a look at how we can extend that a little bit, use the controllers with the blueprints, and I'll show you a little bit, point you to some resources for the light functions and then the lighting as well. Great, so plenty to talk about, plenty to look at, so let's get cracking. So in terms of hardware, we're going to need, obviously, on top of our computer, the head-mounted displays, the goggles, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the big investment is going to be today in the GPU, not massively in the processor. We're not going to spend hours and hours rendering like we do, but we are going to push the GPU, the graphic processing unit, very, very hard. So what we're talking about really is 2K screens at 90 frames a second. That's the recommended frame rate, and 2K screens. We're asking a lot of our video cards. So if we are adding animations, large textures, and so on, we're also going to demand a lot of memory from our graphics card. So that's why I've just sort of put this table here, more or less because it had the video card of my dreams, a 1080 Ti, which has a lot of RAM, 11 gigabytes, and it's got 3,500 cores, which is pretty unbelievable. It's like having a supercomputer on board. And of course, we will be loading a lot of geometry as much as we can, and these things take a lot of memory, so we'll need a lot of RAM. So as usual, technical recommendations go as much as your budget will stretch. But to restate that the investment is going to be in the graphics card. With regards to the head-mounted display here, we're really considering either of these two, the Oculus and the Vive. They're both very, very good, well, top of the range between the Oculus and the Vive. I've tried both of them. Here I'm using the Vive, and currently the Vive is the pro system. I think this interface that we're going to look at in a minute in VR in Unreal has definitely been designed with the Vive. It works very very smoothly there. The room scale is very accurate. The controllers are very accurate because the base stations, the sensors, are plugged in. So it is the industry standard, and I find the way the headband rests around my head very comfortable, and I feel I could sort of be in there for a long time. So it's very sturdy, very solid, and I think if you were to have definitely a dedicated room, this would be very much the choice in an office, for example. The Oculus is more geared towards the general public, obviously it being owned by Facebook. They have got the Facebook ecosystem, which you will need to go through before you launch the app. So it's a little bit of a branding issue, but the controllers are very, very good. I've used it on site, so it's very portable. It's very easy to set up with my laptop. Client was very happy. And the design looks cool. I think it's a little bit more minimal. I really like the controllers, the way it's pressure sensitive, so you can half open your hand, and it works very well with the different fingers you can point. And so, but this is all a little bit theoretical right now. We don't really have the need. So my recommendation would be to, if you want something that's more portable to be able to take to your clients, there's an elegant case with the Oculus as well. The Vive is definitely for a more permanent, stable sort of solution that's not going to move. All right, so let's move on. Let's have a look at some of the VR. So here I am. I've just jumped straight into the interface. My Oculus is set up and ready to go. And I've loaded a completely empty scene here, and I'm just going to go to File and create a new level. And you see we've got the option to go to select this VR basic level here. So let's click on that and let's explore what we can do with this VR mode, which you will have if you have the goggles installed. So I'll just click on this, and I'll put my goggles on and grab my controllers, and so now I'm in the scene, and with the side buttons here I'm able to kind of zoom out and zoom in the scene this way, and kind of change the scale of the scene, which is really interesting. With this kind of flowing laser here, I'm able to select objects, and then they have this little handle that I can use to move them around, or also I could just grab an object and move it around freely, which is very liberating. It also kind of seems to snap to a grid here, which is really useful for the future. So this ability to zoom out and I'll demonstrate a little bit more of that in the scene in a minute. But now we also have the ability to use the interface using this thumbstick here, so which enables it works very well. It's very intuitive. Something that maybe is not so much with the Oculus. I find the thumbstick is a bit awkward. So here I'm actually able to access all the features of the interface, and with these windows, and so I can open and close them and have access to all the things that I would normally have access in the interface. So we'll play a little bit more with that in a minute, but let's see what else we've got in the template. So press Alt V to get out. Okay, so let's start from scratch again, and let's create a new project, and this time choose virtual reality here in the sample project, and we'll go with no starter content and choose the folder of your choice and name of your choice. So you create a project. I've actually already created one, so I'll use that one. And here, if you've got a Oculus or Vive, you've probably seen this already. You've got these maps which explain to you what the options are, and you've got this motion controller map, which is the one we're interested in because it's basically a map which has everything functionally ready to hit the play button using the VR preview button and launch straight into the functionality of the Vive. So let's do that real quick. So I've got my Vive on. I'm just going to click play on here, and then I've got in front of me, well, I'm holding my two controllers, and I've got these two hands, and I'm able to use the thumb pads to teleport on using both controllers. And then if I go near these objects, hey, I can grab one and they're all physically enabled, and I can do lots of stuff, knock the microphone, and throw these around. So grab things and teleport, more or less. Okay, so exit of that. So now back in the scene in the UI, I'd like to point out a few things which are going to be important for us later on. So first of all, we've got this VR controller here, which is the motion controller blueprint here that we've dragged in. So we'll need to refer that back, and this is really where all the functionality of the VR is going to take place. Another thing that is quite easily missed here is I've lost it, the nav mesh bounds volume. if I press the key P on my keyboard, you're going to see this green nav mesh, that's what it's called, which is configured in such a way that it will avoid collision objects and also give me a room, sort of a spacing, maybe that's 0.5 meter around these objects, all interactively, if you want. If I was to move the collision and the box around, the nav mesh is going to adapt to that. So that's something that we will also need to take into account. I'll undo the move here. And then finally, if we go to the edit and go to project settings, we will notice here in the input tab that there's the bindings to the controllers here. We've got the action mappings and the axis mappings that we'll need to port over. So you'll see that there's quite a lot of information here under each setting, and we won't need to set that up all by ourselves manually. We're going to refer back to this one, which is already set up, and import that in our project. So I wanted you to know about this here so that we can refer back to it later. But apart from that, you can also use these files and these templates to import your projects in if you wish to do that. I'm just going to show you the situation where you would have a project and then you want to set the VR into that one, into your own project. So let's have a look at how we can do that. But before we jump into the scene and I tell you the little story, I wanted to point out this website, tomlumen.com. He is the man who has set up the template file that we have been looking at, and he's got this fantastic website and blog, and he describes in great detail the file, and there is even a video about him talking about the file and another description describing the file in great detail. So feel free to, if you want to expand your knowledge, to look at that. So now let's have a look at this Blade Runner scene. For those of you who remember the webinar on materials with substance, I created this scene which had these caustics effects. And when I went to see a Blade Runner, I've been a big fan for years, I saw these caustic effects on the walls and I was like, I wonder how we could do this in Unreal, of course. And also I love these great, amazing out-of-scale spaces that they've got up there. It made me think of this theoretical architect, Louis-Etienne Boulet, where the people are tiny and they've got these magnificent spaces. Anyway, so when I saw these references on the internet from the trailer, I saw this lighting and it made me think of this other project by Louis Kahn in Rochester in North America. And the interesting thing here is how the light source is hidden due to the way the light comes in through this glazing here and bounces on the wall, and you don't see the opening. So it made me think of that. So when I went back to Unreal, I built this sort of hybrid space, and with the light coming around the corner on the platform, and put the caustics in from the other project, put the water in, and I thought I was quite happy with the substance on the walls, and in the end. So hopefully we'll get to show you how you can maybe incorporate that. So little animation of what we're going to try to get to at the end, with a little bit of blueprint, a little bit of fun. Anyway, so let's have a quick look at that scene in VR, and then we'll talk about these two things, rendering and anti-aliasing. Alright, so I've opened the scene and I'm going to jump straight into VR. I've got my Vive on and I'm holding the controllers, And we can see, so I'm in the scene and it's looking great, really nice and sharp and really smooth. And I'm just using these buttons to kind of navigate at the moment to turn the scene around. So let's say I want to zoom out of this and start with this sort of box here, and I want to use the interface that I've got on the controllers, and I'm just going to go to the world outliner here, and I've got this box that's already selected, and I'm just going to hide it here and close that interface. And here I've got rid of my outer box, and I can start looking at this space a little bit like it is. So sorry, I keep knocking the microphone, but I keep looking at this space a little bit like it is a doll's house, so a very precious kind of model at this scale. So now I can start maybe selecting a piece of furniture and move it around. It's very playful and a little bit like it is a doll's house, so maybe it's a bit small at this scale. And so it's kind of more of a toy at this stage rather than a real design tool, as it were. As you can see, I'm kind of struggling a little bit. It certainly takes time, and it doesn't always work at the same time. For example, at the moment I can't select my objects. So let's see, for example, if I could add a piece of furniture. So I've got my content browser here, and I will select my furniture folder. I can just sort of reposition this window here, and I'll just grab a piece of furniture which appears in front of me, and I will come and drag it. I haven't got my snap-on unfortunately, but it's worked fairly well. I'll close the window here. I can move that armchair, and if I wanted to go up a menu level and pick a different gizmo, I would pick, for example, the universal gizmo, which allows me to move and rotate the armchair here. Okay, and so I can sort of place it over there, and or maybe I'll move over there, and I would like to maybe go back to the edit mode and delete this bench and put this armchair instead. So you see the light's been baked, so I'm kind of not giving myself a big favor, but eventually we will be working like this. I think there's no doubt about it, but right now I think it's just a good idea to play around with this and keep up with the development. I'll just try one last thing. I'll go back to my windows and go to the world outliner, and I can maybe turn my caustic lights on and my spotlights here. So suddenly I've kind of turned this on, and it's looking really nice and really sharp, pretty realistic, really nice sort of feeling to be in here and experience it. So here I'm sort of going back on scale 1 to 1, and everything's sort of a little bit bigger, and my navigation is definitely slower. So I can experience it like this, and very quickly kind of just zoom out and see it from the top as well, and just sort of stand up. And it's I think for a client interaction, it's something that could become very exciting to if we were to collaborate, being able to collaborate in this sense with these tools. So very exciting. So that's the project in the VR mode. Before we go on too far, I need to mention these two rather boring sounding issues rendering forward versus deferred, and anti-aliasing MSAA versus temporal. So they're two issues which sort of go hand in hand, but as you know, we are dealing with a lot of speed issues, and let's look at that in practice. I've prepared two scenes here in order for us to compare. So this one, if you go to project settings and you go to the rendering link here, down here, you will be able to, you'll see forward renderer here, and you'll have the option to tick forward shading. Now, this is a small tick, but it's got a big implications. It shows here on the tooltip that to use forward shading on desktop platforms enables you to support MSAA and shader Model 5 hardware. So the bottom line is that forward shading has been developed with VR in mind, and it means things go a lot faster. So we have great advantage in using that, in ticking that. While we're here on this same page, on this same rendering page, if we scroll down, we've got the anti-aliasing method. And here I have selected MSAA, which seems to go in tandem with forward shading. So what happens to that? Let's have a look at the image. So with, I'll turn actually my caustics on, and I will put this in full screen. If I hide the gizmos here, you will see, you may perceive things are quite sharp and run very smoothly. The frame rate here is maxed out. I'm on my laptop, but it's sort of nearly 50, 60 frames a second, 50. So that's, my laptop goes as high as 60, so it's very, very good for me. In VR, the experience is extremely smooth. So this scene is performing very well, and when I compare with the same scene done with deferred shading, so if I go on my rendering tab, the forward shading isn't enabled, and we have temporal AA enabled here. So here the experience is very good as well, but you see the frame rate has dropped a lot, and the scene, so I'll just hide that for now, and if I put that full screen, you will see that the anti-aliasing is much softer as well. It's nowhere near quite as sharp as the other one. If I sort of flash that also. So bear in mind also that we're really concerned with is what it looks like in the VR goggles, and this is also much sharper in the VR goggles. In fact, the temporal, the MSAA has been developed especially to alleviate some of the problems encountered with temporal AA, a little bit like tearing or in the goggles. So the really recommended anti-aliasing method for VR, especially for fast VR, like it was used in Robo Recall, the game. I think that's where they experimented with it very heavily. So the anti-aliasing and the forward shading were developed especially for VR. So the problem is that it doesn't come without a cost, and this is the limitations that we are going to encounter. For example, here I have maxed out in the number of dynamic shadow casting lights in the scene. So you'll see that if I create a new one, it starts breaking down and I get too many overlapping shadowed movable lights. So this may come as an unpleasant surprise if you're trying to set up a scene in forward shading with a large number of lights. You can always put them on static and they will be baked in. So there's a workaround for this particular problem, but there's a lack of support for other things like screen space reflections, which I've grown very accustomed to using because they look great. So there's several limitations regarding forward shading, but I think it's a good method to get accustomed to and to understand, because it's also the method adopted for mobile rendering, and we will no doubt all become mobile one day. So I wanted you to know about this. I will carry on using this scene, the forward shading, but also show you some examples in the deferred shading version of the file. But of course it's really up to you to decide which version you're going to prefer using, and maybe both. I'd recommend trying it out. One last time, just to make sure it's clear, while I've got your attention here, it's a good idea to make this choice early on in the project, because what you really don't want to do is start with deferred renderer and swap halfway through the project to forward renderer, or the opposite, because things might become incompatible, and in my experience things will look horrible. So it's a good thing to choose very, very early on in the project. Right, so now that's clear, let's move on to how we set up the VR in our own scene. So if there's any screen grab that you should take on this presentation, is this one. It's really the step-by-step to implement in your scene one by one. So first thing we've got to do is get the information from that VR template into our scene. So that's the motion controller mapping, and then we've got to configure our NavMesh, place the motion controller, and then use the interaction on our scene. So let's have a look at that in Unreal Engine. Right, so now we have our scene, and I can go into VR mode, and it's all sort of working. I've got my wands here, and I can get out of that, and if I press play, I have somewhat control with my headset, but no wands, no functionality at all here in this scene. So it's as if it was this blank scene, really. So how do we bring in this functionality from the VR template that we saw? Well, very simply, we're just going to add new, click add new here in the content browser, and you add feature or content pack. Here in the blueprint feature, you see you have access to all these templates, including virtual reality, and you can just click add to project. You can see also, while we're here, you've got your content, starter content. So if you need to add content packs later on, you can do that through here. So I'm not going to click the add to project button because I've already done it. But once you've done that, you should have these two folders, Virtual Reality and Virtual Reality BP, in your project. And if you click on Virtual Reality BP, you'll see the maps that we looked at earlier and the blueprint, including the motion controller. So we've got that now done. Let's look at our list. So now we've got to import the mapping from the previous scene. So let's just open that up quickly. So I'll open my VR test and I'll pause while that's loaded. All right, that's loaded. So let's just go to project settings and check that's everything, all the configuration is here that we need. Great. So all we need to do is right click on content in the content browser and show it in Explorer there, and you will see you've got this folder content that we've just highlighted, and on top of that there's the folder called config. So here you just need to click on default input.ini, and if you open that up, you see that this is the file that will hold all the information for our configuration. So you can just right click on here and copy this file and close this, and you can even close this template file. In here, back in our own project, you click on the content here in the content browser, right click and show in Explorer, and you will have the same folder structure and this config folder above your content folder. In there you'll have a default input.ini, which I have renamed default input.ini.back, and then just paste, right click and paste your file, default input.ini that you copied from the other project. Now you probably just need to restart your Unreal editor and reload the scene, and you should have in project settings input all the action mapping and axis mapping properly configured as per the VR template. So that's great, that's done, tick, easy. Moving on to the next item is to configure the nav mesh. So for that, let's zoom out a little bit and press P. So if I press P, there is no nav mesh. So I will need to create a nav mesh in the scene. So let's click, type in NAV for nav mesh, and we want a nav mesh bounds volume. So we'll see that from the top view, and so just scale that up to roughly the size of the space, and let that overlap a little bit. Go back to perspective view, and so let's see our nav mesh in the world. So maybe we'll increase the depth of it as well. And now if I press P, you will see a green square on top of my platform here. So we're missing our bridge, and then we can put something here as well to for practical reasons today. So let's just bring in a simple cube, and you will see that if I increase the size of it, the nav mesh is going to automatically take that into consideration. So when I join it over there, it sort of joins itself. I'm going to lower that. So the nav mesh is going to cover the bridge now. I'm actually going to make this cube invisible and hidden in game. So I'll keep it visible for now, because I will duplicate it and change its size to match that hole more or less, so we can travel to it. Okay, so that's the nav mesh done, and I press P to show it, and you can see so that these items of furniture already got their collisions enabled, and the nav mesh takes advantage of them. Back to our list, we've configured our nav mesh here, and so what we need to do is place the motion controller blueprint in the scene. So let's go back in the scene, and so here we just navigate to our virtual reality BP folder and click on the blueprint, and we've got our motion controller blueprint here. Bring that in the scene. Just going to turn that around 180 degrees, and maybe move that up a little bit so that we see where we are. Right, so just a couple of things to do in here. Make sure that the auto process player here is set on player 0. Otherwise, nothing will happen. So now, let's put on the Vive and see if that works. Great, everything seems to work. I'm where I should be. I've got my 2-hand controllers in front of me, and now using the thumb pads I can teleport. So you see it's not letting me teleport on top of this sofa here. I can teleport on top of the table though, and I can go where I want within the realms of the nav mesh, which won't allow me to teleport in the middle of the water. So that's great. Works very well. Very smooth. And so while we're here, let's extend that a little bit and use that BP pickup cube. So let's zoom in onto the table a little bit, and I've got the pickup cube, and I'm going to drag one into the scene, and let's, with the Alt key, copy a couple, and let's go back in VR and see if we can, very simply, so I can see the cubes over there waiting for me on the table, get close to it and grab one, and it all works. And I can sort of, they've got collision enabled, and I can throw them around and they're going to react to the, so let's see if I can grab this one and bring it over the chair, and they're going to react. So here you see the collision needs to be set more properly on here. So yeah, just to see how we've extended that very easily and very simply. And finally, I'll show you a little bit how I've taken this a little bit deeper and just played around with what I had here. So just these lights, I've clicked the blueprint button here and added it as a blueprint on the lights. Just added this big square, which is a big sort of a big box, a big collision box, and that enabled me to add an event. So when something would collide with this box, I wanted to toggle the visibility of that light. So that's really very simple, and you can see these sort of orange boxes will intersect when my projectiles will be sent over to them. Same thing here with those green boxes. They're just trigger boxes, and when I've added a blueprint to them, then a sound will be played here. And we've got a few more sounds here, and a more significant change has been done to the motion controller here, because it's where the projectile is initiated from. So we'll have the trigger here from the left motion controller. Here we've got the motion controller kit, which is giving a vector world transform here, which is giving us the position and orientation of the motion controller, and then spawning that into the spawn actor function here, which takes the position of the hand and spawns a cube, the pickup cube class that we've chosen here, and plays a sound as well, that swoosh sound. So that enables us to spawn the pickup cube, and if I now go to edit the pickup cube, you will see that I've added a couple of things, like there's a sound on it, which I'm not sure I've managed to get to play yet, but there's a rotating movement, and more importantly a projectile movement component that has been added here. So just by adding add component here, and I'm able to set an initial speed of 2000 to that projectile movement. So that's the way when this cube comes to life, it comes to life with a speed of 2000 here. So let's see how that plays in VR. Press play. So you should hear the sound coming from the scene now, which I've put into 3D. I've got my hand. So the lights turn, fireworks, turn the lights on and trigger the sound. There you go. So I hope that was fun. So finally, there we have it. This is the file finished and completed. Maybe I can tell you a little bit about these caustic lights. I've actually got a video on YouTube where I go a little bit in detail about these lights, so I'll put the links in the chat so you can check that out if you haven't already. But very simply, that I've used what is called a light function here, which is very, very simple. In fact, it's just a material which has got the property, the material domain to put to light function, and that enables us to just have this emissive color and to add this animated caustic pattern here. So I'm not going to go into it now because you're probably tired and got enough information, but do check out the video. I just described these nodes. If you want me to do a step-by-step tutorial, please do let me know and I'll do it starting from scratch. And then, so I just added them, scattered them throughout the scene, and then maybe just to look at the lighting here for the scene is just really, really simple. The way I've done these lights coming in from the ether, as it were, is very, very simple because I use the environment color and set that to very bright yellow, maximum, and put the environment to 10. So I didn't actually have a skylight at all in this. So the GI is baked in the from the environment color, and then these lights are set. I think I have set them static, yes. So they are baked with the GI to try and give us these nice shadows underneath. So it's very simple setup, and it rendered pretty quickly. So for the light mass settings, my usual settings 0.75 and 0.75 for the level scale and lighting. I let the bounces on 1 because there's no skylight in this instance. There you go. So I just to finalize, I just wanted to make sure you've had these links. I'll put these again in the chat. Obviously the Unreal Engine documentation, plenty in virtual reality here. I wanted to reiterate again that Tom Lumen has got some great VR guides and how to getting started as well. So all the steps to get going in VR. And then Marco Romero on Facebook let me know about his great page. Plenty of very detailed information here about VR. So virtual reality Marco Romero. I've got the links in the chat. And then if you wanted to dig a little bit deeper and see how I did this projectile, this is the tutorial that I followed. Very good, on the blueprint page for Unreal. Okay, and finally, I wanted to talk briefly about my lighting course for those of you who wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the lighting, and where here I just really go very deep, step by step, into how creating this, how to set up this scene, and here looking at the UVs and how to work with that, and then we go through 3 different very, very simple methods, but that enable you to have different results. Here it's fully baked, or we've got animations, there's the real-time GI, and then we go a little bit deeper into all the different light sources, and for each thing there's a matching sort of case study. So for example, for the interior, we've got the interior lighting, where we kind of look at each light in the space, and then more kind of a bigger space, more complicated with these sort of materials, and here even the lobby is sort of very large, and then I go very detailed into all the particular problems that we encounter working on very large. And also I want to really point out this little lecture, well, not a lecture, a presentation I do on Richard Kelly, who's a lighting designer. He's fantastic, and I really recommend looking him up. 3 Elements of Light so I'd give a little presentation about that, and then how to set up a swarm for network rendering. So this is very very useful if you've got a render farm. So there you go. Any questions? We're going to go to Q&A, and so I look forward to talking to you live on there. Oh yeah, and before I forget, here's the URL. So 3dw.co.uk/unreal. So normally 3dw.co.uk/unreal, and that should take you just to the page where I talk a lot about more and describe some more and so on. Any questions, let me know.
Well, thank you, Fabrice. What an inspirational and magnificent presentation. It really helped us out a lot. And there's a lot of great questions. Oh, that was kind of fun. Hey, here's Chris Murray. Here's not Chris Murray. Here's Chris Murray. Here's not Chris. Okay. So again, I'm Eddie Perlberg filling in for Chris today. Again, a great presentation. So that wraps up our 5 installment series on visualization, using the Unreal Engine for design visualization for architecture. Again, do not fear. We have a lot of other great webinar series in the works for you in the coming new year. And speaking of which, before we go any further, one more poll question that I'd like to ask of you, so that maybe we can get some more ideas about where to take these different series and what you guys are looking for. So be sure to do this one last poll for me. And if you could go ahead, we capture all your chat comments. So if you could go ahead and make sure that you let us know when you say, I'm not sure what I can do with it. Let us know what that means. Maybe I can't get the quality I'm looking for. That will definitely be a great webinar series for us as far as materials, lighting, and those kinds of things. So don't hesitate to go ahead and put those comments in. So while you're doing that, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that you've asked throughout the course of today. Some of them we've already answered, but more and more are coming in. So I'm going to grab a couple of them. So Boone, yes, no, definitely, sometimes. No, just a joke. So let's go to what would be the best renderer for a high-res scene for ArchViz stuff? Should I go forward even though I'm not specifically VR? And the answer is absolutely. So whether or not you were aware, some of the shots from Star Wars Rogue One were actually done in the Unreal Engine, directly captured in that movie. So the ability to do walkthroughs, stills, and VR work is all within the capabilities of the Unreal Engine. And we're very proud of the fact that, again, we are the standard for which all others are measured as far as quality and the ability to produce these kinds of things. Let's see. Fabrice, which tutorial level in you gives me this information? So Art wants to know which tutorials that he should do from you. I guess I would recommend all, but actually, Fabrice, let me pause you. Apparently, we're not hearing you in the chat window. So if you could just check to see if your microphone is muted. No, I can hear you through one interface, but apparently they are not hearing you through the other. So that's going to. Okay, I will do that. That was you guys missed a really great answer too. So unfortunately, so Let's Rock asks, does the emissions material produce any light into the scene? And yes, Let's Rock, that's exactly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. So that helps out a lot.
Excellent. Okay.
Back to the answer, yes, that's exactly what the emission material is used to produce. So thanks for that question. So back to
just to Steve's questions right at the beginning. Really, we're using video games hardware, video game software as well. So we right now, it's not like if we do offline render, we can send something off to render on the cloud. Right now, it's like having your own console. So if you can play video game on it, you can use Unreal Engine. So I just wanted to make that clear, that we need the GPU inside the machine today. Really, I wouldn't recommend any other solution. The VR mode, and just moving up to Jim's question about the VR mode in the Samsung Gear VR. So you can publish to the Samsung Gear VR, but the actual using the Unreal Engine interface in VR, it's going to have to be on the Vive or the Oculus. Can you hear me now or not? I'm still not sure.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of responses to the yes, we can hear you. So that's working out great.
Right. Some people can, some people can't. Okay, so Gear VR support on roadmap. Again, the Gear VR is really a platform to output to. There's no support of Unreal Engine. You can't load up Unreal Engine in the Gear VR, if you know what I mean. Robert, the motion controller to be able to slide around, I haven't implemented it myself. I see what you mean, though, and the motion in VR, we've discussed it already today quite a bit. The motion that we are experiencing today, which is the teleportation, is what they've included in the VR template for us to use. And this technology has been developed for the game Robo Recall and by Tom Lumen that I showed the website. So maybe try and study what he's done. And again, we're inheriting this technology from the video games, and whether we use it or not, I'm not 100% comfortable with the idea of teleporting. I had clients use it, and especially with the Oculus, you get a very small little remote that's only got one button. And I find that for, executives or people who are not used to game controllers, that little one button is great because they get it immediately. I think in the future we might evolve to large room scale. Here with the Vive, we've only got 5 meter by 5 meter, so this is limited. But eventually, if we get room scale, we're actually going to be able to walk with our feet. I think Eddie thinks too that's going to be the ultimate for us to be able to just walk around.
Yeah, well, they did that very well on Star Trek: The Next Generation with the holodeck. So that's really
Exactly
where we're moving to. So for those of you who are still in the U.S., 5 meters by 5 meters is approximately 15 feet by 15 feet. I just wanted to do some translation. It'll be so much nicer when the whole world adopts the imperial system. So
the imperial, I was going to say. So there was an interesting question. I thought, any insight on lighting a building that has no windows? So the scene you saw today had no windows, effectively. So I just made those light wells were capped. So there was a surface on top, and I made this non-shadow casting. So that's how the light came in. I don't know if that's what you mean. Otherwise, obviously, if there's no window, artificial lighting is going to have done, but what I wanted to say, the reason I picked up on your question, which I see you've just said was not a question, but is to use area lights, to use self-illuminated planes with the tick. So you use in light mass calculations, and you get this lovely soft light, and with very no cost at render time. Any more?
Let me take Carl's question, less about VR and more about AR. Once you have a building in Unreal, would it be simple to use ARKit and drop the building on a conference room table and then be able to have clients look at it in virtual mode through a phone? Carl, there's a lot to this question, but the answer is yes, but. So the answer, to use the ARKit, yes, that is very straightforward and designed to do exactly what you're talking about. We had a lot of fun with that at AU with a number of different models, including a motorcycle on a lift. So the ability to do that with Unreal Engine with outstanding quality is definitely there. The question I ask is the ability of the phone. So we found that, with our iPad Pro, the results were spectacular. As we tried it on other devices, maybe less. So, you know what I mean? I think all you have to do is kind of test out some of the devices that you're using, and you'll see that this will be a great addition to your presentations to clients. And go ahead,
Eddie. If I can just interject here to just say, in this instance, to really manage your clients' expectations, because from what I've seen, we're just used to seeing everything on our phone today, and they think they're going to see the building with all the detail on the phone, and that's obviously not going to be possible. So I think it's important to explain the drop, maybe in quality or in level of detail or in responsiveness, interactivity, that you're going to have between a phone and a workstation with one of these graphics card in it.
Let's see. If I could just go back to thanks everyone for filling out that last poll question. So it looks like, we're kind of equally spread throughout a number of the different responses. We'll start with I'm not sure what I can do with it. And I strongly recommend that you take a look at the other installments in the web series. And those were developed by Chris and Fabrice to really be inspirational in some of the kinds of things you can do with a real-time engine, and thus you saw today moving all the way to VR. kind of giving you some insights as far as materials and setting those up, lighting and such. So I strongly recommend that you capture some of those in the chat at the top in the sticky notes, and be inspired by that. And then next we have I don't know where to start, and I think we all have been there with a lot of different. Yes. For those that know me, you know that I've been speaking a lot about design visualization in 3ds Max for a long time. And I often talked about, this is the same kind of question I got about 3ds Max. And the reality is, start small. You know what I mean? It's kind of like playing a guitar, and you don't book yourself at Carnegie Hall and then go to the store and buy a guitar. You start out small and you start to learn some of these techniques, and you develop more and more, and you can become better at them. There's a lot of great resources on the Unreal site. Fabrice is a great resource, and you gave a lot of other links to other great resources. With 3 million strong out there using the Unreal Engine, you can imagine. I was very inspired by how you guys were helping each other in today's session. So I don't know how to prepare my data. That, my friends, is going to be one of our very first webinar series. So I can assure you that after the new year, you can rely on us to start to tell you and talk to you about preparing your data. And I can't get the quality I'm looking for is kind of the final answer. And again, it sounds like another really great opportunity for a webinar series. But I can assure you, with seeing the images that you saw in Rogue One, I can assure you, you can get the quality you're looking for. And today's, Fabrice, your demonstration today, I was gobsmacked with how beautiful that data set was. So
thank you. I mean, just to say, I saw some people were sort of talking about architecture and scenes with lots and lots of things in it. And sure, we can all do that, but I don't think you'll be enormously entertained by just bringing a teapot and another armchair and another sofa, and it's a little bit the reasons why I try to show very, very, very simple scenes, because with these scenes we have very few parameters to focus our attention on. So, for example, in that scene, I had to solve the problem of that substance tiling over large areas of walls, and that was enough if you want problems to deal with in those very simple scenes. And this is how really you want to tackle your learning, if you want, where you're not going to suddenly have this enormous project which is going to take weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And I think it's very different the way you handle and start even a big project compared to a small one. So definitely I'll go with Eddie's recommendation: start small.
And don't forget the DataSmet plugin really helps out a lot as far as converting your materials automatically, helping you with your geometry, helping you with your lights and cameras. It really makes it almost a one-click solution for that. So be sure to sign up for the beta. Again, I'm going to ask you to be a little patient with us. The response has been overwhelming, and each one of your email addresses need to be put into your account so that we can get you the plugin through the Epic Game Launcher. That's where you'll actually find it. So again, thank you for your patience. But once you get there, we're desperately looking for your comments and use it, and let us know how it's working out for you. Shall we continue?
Right. I wanted to go back to Remy's question about the best renderer for a high-res screenshot, because I wonder if you, Remy, you were referring to the Ford renderer.
Oh, yes.
It's the problem with Ford renderer is that you're going to have a lot of technical limitations. The one which is very important is the number of lights, and you're only going to get number 6 or 7, I think, dynamic shadow casting lights. You look it up. Maybe the Ford renderer has this limitations with screen space reflections, which I use all the time now because they work so well. So it's not so much, if you want to do a still image, I would say maybe try to stay with the deferred renderer, but experiment with different anti-aliasing. For if you're not in VR, the temporal anti-aliasing works really well. The problem with MS anti-aliasing is you get problem in the highlights when you get very small, very bright pixels. The MSA doesn't deal with those very well. So if it's for a still image that you can render with Ansel, you can output up to 60,000 pixels across. I've done it in about 2 minutes, so it's pretty impressive. So do try. But I would say if it's for just a still image, still render, you don't need to go into this forward rendering and MSAA too much. It should work for still.
Excellent point.
So, AR kit. Sorry, there's a questions about AR because we put it in some of the literature that came out, but it was just too early. And AR AR Kit and AR Core are the both solutions from Google and Apple, and I didn't have time to look into it enough. So in the new year, we'll definitely come back and talk to you about those.
So we've gone quite a bit over. Just a couple more questions before we wrap things up. Will you post this webinar on YouTube? So in a few hours after we process everything, we'll send you out an email, and again, that will have a link to the replay, so you can go back and watch this presentation at any time. And then secondly, it'll also have a link to our survey. Please promise me you'll fill that out so that we can make sure that we know we're on track, we're hitting the right notes for you, and we can gather some insight as far as where to go from here. So that I wanted to make sure you understood. What else can we quickly answer for you?
There's a few quick ones. Make a note and I'll send you an email. There was one. Normal maps work in VR. Don't worry about normal maps. They work absolutely fine. This is maybe you caught something in the chat. There's a discrepancy between the two eyes. Data in the context of Unreal, it's just your 3D model that we bring from one place to the other. Art, talk to my lighting. We're here to talk about VR, but subscribe to my newsletter maybe by downloading one of the files on the YouTube channel, or I'll send you an email. I'll make a note and I'll send you an email. There was one. Normal maps work in VR. Don't worry about normal maps. They work absolutely fine. This is maybe you caught something in the chat. There's a discrepancy between the two eyes, but no need to worry about that. It all works very well. This is the question I wanted to answer about. Somebody was asking if they should choose an Oculus or a Vive. And so again, I'll reiterate, for me today, having worked with both, if you've got a fixed room where you're going to have enough plugs. So because the thing about the Vive, I've got the sensors that you need to put in each corner of the room. They need to have a plug. So you need to have a room with plugs in.
Electrical
power outlets. But the thing, because they have power, they're very precise and they're very powerful. So that's why the Vive works so well. So if you've got a room dedicated or a meeting room that's got room in it, and your setup is not going to move, I would definitely go with the Vive. If, on the other hand, you've got a smaller space, you need to travel to your clients to make demonstrations, you are looking at using this on site perhaps, or things like that, I would choose the Oculus because I've tried it in this context and that works very well. So Oculus is very easy to set up quickly into a limited space.
I'll grab a couple of the roadmap-y kind of questions. So Tony asked, does Datasmic work for 3ds Max like SketchUp? more than 3ds Max for like SketchUp. So the list of CAD applications that it works with, Tony, are extremely long. And for those that aren't yet there, I can assure you that there is not anything that is being missed on our roadmap. So you can be sure that products like SketchUp are definitely a very strong and important aspect to moving forward. And then let's see, somebody asked about Revit, and the answer would be again, with the number of you using Revit for your design application, Revit again is a very important application for our long-term development of Datasmith. So, having said that, in the meantime, if you're not finding that your application is yet there when you get to the beta, then for some products like Revit, for now, we're considering 3ds Max to be the bridge that you can bring your Revit data into, and then using Datasmith, capture all the goodness that is your design and move it into the Unreal Engine. So we want to make sure that the experience for all of these different applications is top-notch. So some of them are, a little bit more complicated than others, but we'll get there for you as we continue. So still in beta, still working on complex. It. Yeah. So there's lots of work being done on it. So I hope that answers your question.
Edwards, it's an interesting question. Talks about ray trace reflections. So. You're probably referring to the use of reflection probes inside of Unreal Engine, and these work very well and enable us to have this incredible real-time speed. But with regards to ray trace reflection, we actually already have that in Unreal. So we're not going to go into it to depth now, but look up screen space reflections and the reflection plane. So these are accurate real-time ray trace reflections, but they need to be dealt with specifically and optimized, because obviously they take a lot of rendering power.
Well, we could continue on for many hours throughout the day answering all your questions, but unfortunately, I think we're out of time for today. So again, Fabrice, thank you so much for your time today. I feel very honored.
It was my pleasure.
I'm honored and proud that I could. My very first webinar was with you, and such a great topic. So thanks again.
Well, me too.
I very much appreciate it. Thank you for everyone for attending. Again, you'll get an email survey and replay links, so don't forget about that. Capture the links in the chat so that you can go back if you haven't already and check out the other great webinars in this series. Look for more series coming up in the new year, and hope everyone has a great holiday. And in the meantime, thank you again for your attendance, and thank you again for your interest in Unreal. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time.